Hello, everyone. My name is Partha Mohanram. I'm the John H. Watson Chair in Value Investing and Professor of Accounting at the Rotman School of Management. I'm also the Director of the India Innovation Institute. So thank you all for tuning into our live stream today of very exciting event with Professor Joseph Wong interviewing Ravi Arora. Even though this event is taking place virtually, we wish to acknowledge the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Great River. Today, while we are meeting virtually, Toronto is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. So it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this year's U of T Exponential Impact Lecture at Rotman and introduce Professor Joseph Wong. Joseph is the Interim Vice President International, as well as the Ralph and Roz Halbert Professor of Innovation at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Professor of Political Science at the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at University of Toronto. He has also held the Canada Research Chair in Health, Democracy and Development for 2 terms from 2006 to 2016. He is the author of many academic articles and books, including Healthy Democracies, Welfare Politics in Taiwan and South Korea, and Betting on Biotech, Innovation and the Limits of Asia's Developmental State, both published by Cornell University Press. Inspired by the Sustainable Development Goals in collaboration with the MasterCard Center for Inclusive Growth, Professor Wong developed the REACH Alliance, a model for student-led, faculty-driven, multidisciplinary research dedicated to investigating the pathways to success for innovative development programs that are reaching the world's most marginalized populations. If you'd like to submit a questions, please refer to the instructions posted in the YouTube chat. Joseph, it's a pleasure to have you here. Ravi, welcome to U of T, and thank you for hosting the lecture. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Partha. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University of Toronto's Exponential Impact Lecture presented by the Rotman School of Management. It's really my privilege to serve as the university's Interim Vice President International, and one of the things that has become, or one of the things that is very obvious to all academic leaders is the important role that a global university such as the U of T plays when it comes to innovation. And indeed, in many respects, that is the motivation of a university, is to really be engaged in innovative, cutting-edge work that pushes the envelope. But at the same time, as many of you know, the University of Toronto is a massive university, 90,000 students, thousands upon thousands of faculty members and researchers and so forth. And so there's this constant trade-off between the scale of an institution and an organization such as a university like ours versus, on the other hand, the kind of agility and nimbleness that we like to see in organizations as they are truly innovative and cutting edge. And indeed, you know, we can also think of this in the corporate sector as well. And we have the pleasure today of having a real thought and action leader, of someone who has implemented really nimble and agile policies and programs and a mindset that we might typically associate with a smaller organization in a massive organization that is the Tata family of companies. We conceived of the Exponential Impact Lecture as a way of highlighting and learning from innovation leaders from forward-thinking corporations from around the world, and to really foster intersectoral collaboration and dialogue and the learning of best practices between us. As many of you know, our first Exponential Impact Lecture was held a little over a year ago, and we had an opportunity to look into how Philips innovates across their diverse range of products and services. But when you think about diversity, innovation, and scale, you can't help but think about Tata. As many of you know, Tata is a conglomerate comprising over dozens of companies spanning a wide, disparate range of domains, everything from chemical refining, power generation, automotive design, more recently, foray into medical diagnostics, mining, consulting services, and of course, much beyond that. I recently had the opportunity actually to chat with Tata's Chief of Human Resources this past year, and was amazed to learn that her portfolio consists of over 700,000 employees at Tata. So you can imagine, on the one hand, the extraordinary opportunity for innovative thinking and practice, but also at the same time, the kinds of constraints that we might presume to be in an organization as large as Tata. And so with that, I'm really pleased to introduce to you today Ravi Arora, the person who is behind these extraordinary innovative practices and outcomes at Tata. Ravi began his career at Tata Steel as an engineer, and later, after completing his executive MBA, he initiated and led a series of programs and initiatives across the Tata family of companies. He joined Tata Sons in 2009, which is the conglomerate for which Tata Steel is one group company. Ravi is currently the Vice President, Group Innovation for Tata Sons, and he is responsible for the Corporate Innovation Program. Under his mandate, he has conceptualized and delivered programs like Tata Innovista, Tata Innoverse, Tata Ideas, Tata Innometer, and Challenges Worth Solving. And in some of my background reading of some of the terrific work that that Mr. Arora has led is this program Dare to Try, which I think is an incredibly alluring and inviting concept. He, of course, brings with him extraordinary engineering background, but when you read some of his writings, you know that he also has a deep appreciation for the behavioral sciences, the social sciences. He brings with him a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary instinct into his work. We're very grateful to have you here with us today, Ravi. We look forward to hearing your talk, and I hope that this is the start of a continued engagement between our university, the Rotman School, and the Tata Company. Please join me in welcoming Ravi Arora.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Partha. It's actually a great privilege for the Tata Group to be considered to share its story in this very prestigious lecture series organized annually by the University of Toronto and the Rotman School of Management. Honestly, I consider myself very fortunate to be telling this story on behalf of the Tata Group. It's a great honor. And I would like to thank not only the organizers, but also the attendees who have taken their time out in today's time when there is a digital overload or the screen overload, so to speak. So thank you for that. I really appreciate for taking the time out. And sorry, I forgot to share my screen. Just give me a minute. I'll assume that the screen is visible to the audience. And
yes.
With that assumption, I'll continue. Yeah. Thank you. So thank you once again for this opportunity. Joe had already given some context to the Tata Group, and thank you for that. And Joe did mention about sorry, this how do I minimize this? Yeah, sorry about that. So Joe did mention that when he spoke to the chief of Group HR, he referred to about 700,000 people. Now you can see on the screen that we are 750,000 people. So that's Joe. That's how fast we are growing as a group. So the whole story of Tata Group on innovation actually started 150 years ago, when in 1868 our founder Jamshedji Nasawanji Tata started a company, Tata and Sons, with the seed money of rupees 21,000 rupees. Actually, I don't know how much is that in today's terms, but the number is rupees 21,000. Now, while you may read some of the statistics, data points on the screen, but I would like to highlight 3 points, especially in the context of innovation and the DNA that we are trying to embed as innovation as a DNA inside the Tata Group companies. In this last 150 years, we had a total of 7 chairmen only, including the current chairman, Mr. N. Chandrasekharan. Now, this clearly indicates the Tata Group generally takes a long-term view on the future and gives a lot of time to the leadership team. And in turn, it gives a lot of confidence to people like us, the managers, to try and work on subjects that have a long gestation period. For instance, embedding innovation in the DNA. So that was point number one. So the source of confidence comes from the long-term view is that was the key point. The second is if you look at the slide, it shows there are 10 sectors in which we operate. Now, if you look at these sectors, the clock speed of these sectors is so different. The financial consumer sector vis-a-vis the steel sector, the clock speed is very, very different. Not only the clock speed, but the markets and the consumers' expectations are so diverse. So it was very clear to us that one single approach to innovation will definitely not work. So it has to be an approach which is generic to some extent and customized to sector, not only sector, but also to the company. And the third point is the 750,000 employees, and we add about 50,000 by and large every year in various geographies. And the challenge is how soon can we imbibe all these 50,000 new employees, not only on the Tata values and ethos, but also how do we imbibe them the high performance DNA, which definitely includes innovation. So that's the challenge that I wanted to start the story of the Tata Group. And before we go into the current work that we have been doing for the last 10 or 15 years, I would just take a few more minutes to set the context of the history of the Tata Group to make it more contextual. On every Tata employee, if you speak to any of them anywhere in the world, we take pride on two aspects of the group, which is deeply ingrained right from the founding days of Tata. Ethics or integrity. I don't want to spend time on that today. But what we say very openly is that we must stand, whatever we do must stand the test of public scrutiny. That's one line sentence. So we all are guided in everything that we do, that it can test, it has to stand the test of public scrutiny someday or the other. So as I said, I don't want to spend time on that, but I would rather go to the second point, which has a far deeper connect with the innovation story of the Tata Group, and that's the community. The community has always been at the center of the Tata Group. For those who are not aware of it, 66% of the equity share capital of the parent company where we come from, which is Tata Sons, is held by philanthropic trusts which support education, health, livelihood generation, and also art and culture. So that's the 66%, which means the 66% of the dividend or the profit, which is distributed in terms of dividend, goes for such philanthropic activities. Now, more interestingly, is when the founder started the Tata and Sons, within 24 years, he created a J.N. Tata Endowment Fund for Indians to pursue higher education. And there have been many stalwarts and scientists, again, I don't want to name them, but there have been, including one of the ex-presidents of India, was also one of the J.N. Tata scholars. But more importantly, if you take a snapshot of 1924, in 1924, 1/5 of the Indians in the Indian civil services were the scholars of J.N. Tata Endowment Fund. So that was the amount, and most of them, and some of them we have heard, have come and spoken. They take a lot of pride in being a J.N. Tata scholar. A second example on this strand of DNA comes from the second chairman, Mr. Dorabji Tata, who pledged all his personal wealth to create the Dorabji Tata Trust. And that trust, and the funds of that trust has been used to create institutions. To name some of them, Tata Institute of Social Science, India's first institute for social sciences, Tata Memorial Cancer Research Hospital, India's first cancer hospital and perhaps the largest one, the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, India's first institute for research in mathematics and physics, that became the cradle for India's atomic energy research. So these are the few things that I wanted to leave behind by saying that these were the two broad strands if I were to put, if any Tata employee would have to define the DNA of Tata, these are two main strands on which the Tata Group is built. I'll take one more slide to give you some more examples of the formative years of the Tata Group. I'm talking about the 19th and the first half of the 20th century now. So we take pride in two things once again in that period as well. One is the pioneering and the second is social innovations. In terms of pioneering, not only we created companies like the Empress Mills, which doesn't exist today, the Taj Group of hotels. I am hoping that many of you have heard about it. Largest chain of 5-star hotels. And the first hotel was created in 1903. Tata Power and Tata Steel, all these were created before 1910. And if you look at the literature, there have been umpteen innovations not only in creation of these companies but also in achieving high performance levels which were unheard of globally in those times. I'm talking about Tata Power and Empress Mills and Tata Steel. That's the amount of performance levels that was achieved in the early 20th century. And there are umpteen number of innovations behind it. So quickly moving to the social innovation, which is also very contextual today. And again, I'll give you some examples of innovations, which is social innovations, which started through the employee welfare scheme, so to speak. And some of the examples are the Empress Mills introduced employee pension plan in 1886 and Provident Fund in 1901. And these became law after 50 years in India, more than 50 years in India. It started free medical aid in 1913 and schooling facilities for the employees' children in 1916, sickness and maternity benefits in 1921. And one more, the 8-hour working rule that we all talk about today was started in 1912, which is 1912 in Tata Steel, long before it was generally accepted in Europe and the United States of America. And one last example is profit sharing bonuses began in 1934. And the earliest mention of a similar program that we could trace comes from the Scanlon plan in 1930s, and once again in USA. So these are some of the social innovations which started as employee welfare, but then became the norm, so to speak, globally, not only in India, but also globally. Now, as I said, there can be multiple examples that I can share on these social innovations. But I would like to fast forward now 50 years, which is 1950 till about maybe 1947 when India got independence, till about 1991 when Indian economy opened up. In these 50 odd years, 45, 50 years between the independence and the 1990, then Indian economy was quite shackled. We had by and large a socialist approach. It was a seller's market, and there was a very, very little focus on product quality or process quality. Now, with that context in 1991, when the Indian economy opened up, and that was the time when our current chairman emeritus, Mr. Ratan Tata, was the chairman of Tata Group. He immediately sensed that now that the Indian economy is opened up, there will be absolutely the survival of the fittest. The rule will be applied to the companies, to the Indian companies, because of the multinationals which are going to come into India and set up shops in India. So as a quick, shall I say, to create that culture of improvement, the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award of the US was adopted, and it was rechristened as Tata Business Excellence Model. And it was followed very rigorously in the Tata Group. And you can see the results on the right-hand side for at least for 20-25 years time, how it has helped the Tata Group companies in creating a culture of catch up, and not only catch up but catch up fast. Now, some of the few traits that we could attribute to the Tata Business Excellence Model are benchmarking, best practices, and competitiveness. These three. And I would say these three, when they got embedded into the Tata culture or the Tata system or the Tata DNA, in some sense, they set a platform for innovation. I'm saying in some sense, or I'm saying it's somewhat a perfect platform, maybe not a very perfect platform, and I'm going to qualify that. The reason I'm saying that somewhat a perfect platform is because as years passed, when Tata managers started practicing the business excellence model, the confidence of Tata employees to emulate others gradually increased. If you go in about 2000, 2004 and 2005 period, when more than around 80,000 to 90,000 people were touched by the Tata Business Excellence model, if you go around and talk to a Tata manager, the response that you would typically get is, "Sir, can you show me someone who is doing it?" And we will do it. And which is good, but may not be the best for innovation. And the second is, when the race to catch up happened, and people started catching up faster and faster as typical managers, there's hardly any room left for failures. And if at all there were failures, there was hardly any opportunity, or there was no desire, or there was no, shall I say, encouragement to share those failures and also to accept those failures. So all these things put together, I would say they definitely led us to the innovation program, and which was the right thing to do. And this was once again sensed by none other than Mr. Tata himself. So if I were to again quote Mr. Tata around the period of 2005 and 2006, which is around about 10, 12 years after Tata Business Excellence model. Now I quote Mr. Tata. He said, "We need to create an environment where we do things differently and do things others have not done." This was a very soft, shall I say, statement or a speech that he delivered in one of the Tata conferences. But now listen to the other one, which is slightly more a stronger message. And what he says is, and I quote, "The most disappointing thing over the last 10 years has been the fact that great deal of energy is spent in telling why something cannot be done. If half that energy was spent in trying to figure out how to do something that was different, that was new, that perhaps is a little bold and risky, we would be leaders in some of the fields that we were in." Unquote. So that set the context for the program, for the innovation program. And it was very clear that now the two programs, the TBM program and the innovation program, they have to go hand in hand. They have to both coexist. They have to collaborate. That was a very clear message, loud and clear, delivered to everybody in the Tata Group. Now, to start the body of knowledge, to create that body of knowledge on innovation, again, we did a few things, and I don't want to spend too much time on that. But yeah, we went a bunch of 20 people, senior Tata leaders went to US and spent a day each in companies like Microsoft, Intel, Hewlett Packard, 3M, Raytheon, and so on and so forth. And a day was spent in Harvard Business School as well. We also went to Japan only to study how R&D supports, or the R&D outcome supports technological innovations. And we went to Toyota, Fuji, Toshiba, Nissan, Olympus, and many more companies in Japan. And the third one that we made a visit a little later was to Israel to see how it supports the startup ecosystem in Israel. So that was one thing that we did by taking a bunch of senior Tata leaders to these three countries. And we had also invited the gurus of innovation into Tata Group in India to speak to a large number of Tata people. And to name a few, because I need to acknowledge their contribution in the journey of Tata Group. The Clay Christensen, late Clay Christensen, we owe a lot to him. He is from Harvard Business School. Henry Chesborough from UC Berkeley, and Julian Birkinshaw from London Business School. They have contributed a lot in the body of knowledge that we have today in the Tata Group. Now, having created the body of knowledge, once again, it was very clear, very evident the way Tata Group is structured. The very federal, independent set of companies, many of them are listed. And the Tata Sons is not listed, but maybe around 30 odd companies are listed separately. So it's a very federal, independent structure, in which Tata Sons is obviously a majority investor. It was very clear that the job was only to rekindle Tata employees, amongst the Tata employees, the spirit of innovation once again, which existed around 50, 60 years ago. So the focus was only to, as I said, to ignite a few set of people, create champions, and then spread it across the group. So that was the whole idea. So with that brief introduction to how the program's created, I'm going to talk about the three programs today in my subsequent slides. The first one is in the program through which we try to inspire our Tata group of employees through a program called Tata Innovista. The second one is the ideation program to help employees ideate. The third one is to be more open to the outside world, be more collaborative. And all these three, and I've chosen these three programs because we feel that the theme of this lecture is exponential. These three programs have a potential to deliver exponential returns when seen from a lens of these three metrics that are listed on the right side of your screen, which is how are employees adopting these three programs. And when I'm talking about these programs, these are a mix. These programs are nothing but platforms plus a process behind the platform. So how do we make them attractive enough for employees, and how do we give them experience so that they come again and again and participate? And thirdly, because of their participation, the outcomes should be beneficial, not only to the employees but to all the stakeholders. So I'm going to spend a few minutes now in the next few slides talking about these three programs in some details. The first one is Tata Innovista, which made a very simple beginning around 15 years ago as a small experiment that we conducted once we came back from the visit to US. And when we found that in Tata Group, people don't know how to define innovation. People are not recognized for innovation. There are no stories around innovation. When a new employee joins an organization, there is hardly any story to talk about innovation. And when we did a survey, we found there is self-confidence amongst 2,000 people whom we surveyed. We found that the self-confidence to innovate was lacking. And we realized that the only way to address is to inspire them through stories. And for that, we wanted to capture stories. And that's how this program was created 15 years ago. But now it has become a massive program which addresses not only the tactical needs of creating stories, capturing stories, and inspiring people, but it does many more things which are mentioned at the bottom. But let me go one by one. So the 6 awards that we have created are there in front of you. You can read them. I don't want to explain to them. But I would like to spend time on a few things which are inclusive and wholesome. Now, if you look at these awards, these are very inclusive. If you look at the innovation life cycle, there's an award separately for our folks who work in R&D. Whenever they create a new patent which has a value, there is separate. So they compete within themselves under the category called piloted technology. Similarly, for design. Now, when I'm talking about design, I'm talking about design from all aspects: the product design, packaging design, engineering design, experience design in terms of physical space like hotels and restaurants, or office space, or in digital space like mobile apps or web apps, so to speak. And also we know that the innovation is not confined to what happens inside the companies, but it also goes beyond the two boundaries. And therefore you can see the most innovative partners. So we recognize our partners, upstream partners and downstream partners, for the innovative work and the impact that they create through their innovative work. Not only that, not only it is inclusive and wholesome, but this program, we have tried to make it very level playing. So the R&D folks don't compete with the folks who work in new products. And the design people don't compete with the people who are working in the process innovation space. So for example, if you look at implemented innovations, so we have further created level playing for folks who create new services vis-a-vis those who create new products. Similarly, we have created a separate space for people who innovate in the core process area. And it is very important area for us, especially for the manufacturing companies who operate in this geography. They compete a lot on cost, and core process innovations play a massive role in making them competitive and scaling up. Similarly, for support processes like human resources and logistics, we have created a separate category altogether, so the people to compete with each other and then share good practices and stuff like that. Now, one interesting example is the last one, which is enabling customers' innovation. Now, if you look at Tata Group, there are many companies who operate in the space of providing services, knowledge services. It could be software and it could be engineering, it could be consulting. Now, their work alone doesn't qualify as innovation, but what they do and they provide to the customer, the outcome for the customer qualifies as innovation. But we do recognize them, depending on how much they have contributed and stuff like that. Because we believe and we have seen that this helps in moving up the value chain for them when it comes to customer engagement. So that is how this is what I wanted to highlight on the inclusive and level playing and wholesome. Now, moving on to vocabulary. Now, we all know, some of us know that the ISO 9000 standard for innovation was created, I guess, in 2018-19. But we have been creating this vocabulary around innovation through this award program, because now this award program touches about 100,000 people in Tata Group. And if you talk to many Tata managers, the vocabulary like consumer insights, consumers, customer jobs, underserved customers, unserved customers, how to define the uniqueness of innovation, how to build entry barriers for an innovation, not only through patents, and by the way, patents is also part of the vocabulary. The strength of the patent, how do you define the market size, and how does business model influence the market size, and how to tweak the business models to increase the market size, that technology readiness levels, the barriers, and how important it is to keep refreshing the innovation. And innovation is not about doing once and then forgetting, but the refresh rate of innovation. These are all part of the vocabulary that this award has created. These are common vocabulary which cuts across all the sectors. Moving on to what Joe mentioned, Dare to Try. Yeah, it is a very popular award. I mean, in simple words, it's a painkiller. It definitely helps us in encouraging risk taking. In simple words, it recognizes those innovation attempts which could not deliver the results. So in some sense, the failure, so to speak, in very simple words. So what does it do? It's a way of manifestation of Tata leaders, saying that here is a safety net that we provide to our employees for only intelligent failures when they set out to work on a very audacious innovation project. So there could not have been a better way to say and to exhibit the appetite for taking risks and accepting failures. So we have been doing this for the last 13, 14 years, Dare to Try. And last point that I wanted to highlight on this slide is the metric. Now, there are various ways of measuring innovation. Revenue and profit from new products. It could be difference between the market cap vis-a-vis the book value, or the market value of the share vis-a-vis the book value of the share, and so on and so forth. But each one of them has its own lacunae, and there are a lot of debates around them, and I have my own point of view around them. But we said, okay, let us create one unique metric using the Tata Innovista as a program. And that metric is a very popular metric that is used in the agri sector, the farm output, which every farmer uses it, and we call that metric as a harvest. So Tata Innovista provides a very excellent method for every company to compare its harvest of innovation 1 year vis-a-vis the next year, vis-a-vis the third year, and so on and so forth. So we feel it's working great for us, and it is creating that exponential that you can see now on your screen, trend of participation. What started with in 2006, you can see how it has grown exponentially in the last 14 years. And if you look at the employee participation on the right-hand side, again, as I said, 100,000, about 100,000 employees, and with a very healthy mix of first-time and the repeat employees. And for the repeat employees, we also track how many of them are serial innovators, which means how many are coming again and again, and to the extent of identifying serial innovators. And when we did some research on these serial innovators, we found a very interesting insight. We found that most of these serial innovators, when it comes to innovation, they hunt in pairs, the innovator and the boss. One of them works as a maverick, creative guy, and the other works as a venture capitalist in some form, which means the navigator, or the guy who helps this person to navigate through the innovation program. The Dare to Try, which Joe mentioned, and we also mentioned, this is something that we track very closely because we believe the growth in this is definitely a lead measure which indicates the growth in the quality or the impact of the future innovations. And this also is a very heartening trend. And the only concern that we always have in the back of the mind somewhere is that, are we promoting failures to this award? So it was 3 years ago when we gave this research project to INSEAD Business School, and they did a longitudinal study for 8 years, looking at thousands of data. And they came out with an outcome which is perhaps should be published anytime. It said that people who participate in Dare to Try award, which means who fail and participate, they have a much higher chance of coming out successfully in an innovation in future, and even more higher chance to come out with an impactful innovation successfully in future. So that's how. And if I were to give you a few examples of innovation, a very quick one, just to share as to what type of projects do participate in the Innovistor. Now, here is a project, very simple, which we have done with the help of along with the academic institute, filing a patent of creating a very high strength 22 karat gold using titanium. Now, when the company created this gold, now it's able to create jewelry with half the weight, making it more affordable for Indians who have a very strong urge to buy jewelry and collect jewelry and the creation of, so they sort of the wealth, when the people have a tendency in India, they said, to buy jewelry a lot, so it helps. So graphene from natural resources. There are multiple ways of producing graphene. Now here is a company which produce graphene using a natural source called seed lac. So seed lac, and there's a patent already filed, you can Google it. So and then this graphene is now being commercialized extensively by Tata Steel. Another example is using the protein from the bacteria to use that protein and put it as a coating on the steel to see if it can be made anti-corrosive. Now, this was a Dare to Try project. On upper, there is a project done by Jaguar Land Rover to create a battery pack, very concise honeycomb battery pack for lithium-ion batteries, to create a lightweight battery pack for their electric vehicles. Similarly, there is an example of Tata Motors, which is about the first Indian car with the 5-star safety norms that they achieved. It was an entry which came into Tata Innovistor 3 years ago. All indigenously developed safety norms, the first Indian car, as I mentioned. And the bottom, there is an example of TCS Ion. It's a product in itself, and it's an example of how this product has continuously reimagined themselves by creating multiple innovations, and it has now become a massive innovation in itself, which is touching a few million people in India through their TCS Ion platform. Moving on to the second program very quickly, which I wanted to talk about is the crowdsourcing platform of Tata Ideas. Now, in this, I will give a very quick story of Henry Chesborough. When he came into India in 2008, when we invited him, we thought, and when he did some workshops for our senior people, and we covered maybe 300 odd people, we felt it is not a very difficult subject. And we thought, yeah, it's a matter of a few months that we will become masters on open innovation. We tried very hard. But after 1 year, we all agreed that we have failed miserably. We could not even start. And I'm talking about 2008. None of our companies could find a problem that they were not able to solve and were willing to or wanted to take help from the outside world. This is nothing but a cultural barrier. So we reflected, and what we did was we created 2 stages of open innovation. And the first stage is what you see on your screen, which is Tata Ideas. In this case, what we have is we have on the right side we have Tata employees as people who is the crowd. We want them to ideate. But on the left-hand side are the important set of people. They're the senior leaders who throw challenges, and we call them wicked challenges, at the Tata employees. The idea was to achieve few things, 2 or 3 broad things. Number one was definitely to increase employee engagement on ideation. But more importantly was to see if we can create a habit of giving some confidence, breaking silos of the company, and also creating that little confidence among the Tata leaders that there is no harm in opening the challenges to the outside world, and it is beneficial. So that's how, and the way we define our wicked challenges is very simple. We say that all those challenges which appear solvable, but when you start ideating, it is not easy. And that's what we try and do, to engage both sides of the stakeholders, the senior leaders and the employees at large. And that's how we are trying to create culture on this platform. To give you some examples of the challenges, to show how wicked they are. Again, taking example of graphene. So if you have a graphene fortified fabric, which can generate heat when connected to batteries, how can it be used? If we have, and one of the Tata companies has developed an autonomous vehicle control, how can it be used within the Tata Group companies? How can we trim trees? Because some of the Tata companies do manage cities also, and some of them have plantations in coffee plantations and stuff like that. So how do we trim trees, bringing efficiency and safety? How do we forecast dengue in cities where we have a large Tata presence? And how do we produce monsoon coffee without actually waiting for monsoon? So these are some of the very wicked challenges which we feel are quite wicked, and there are some hundreds of them, on which we are trying to, as I said, achieve two things. One is to help generate ideation, and also, and also, if you can see on the screen, what we did achieve was that 85% of the ideas came from outside the company, which threw the challenge. And this was a fantastic outcome for us, because this set the stage for stage two. This gave confidence to Tata people that yes, there is no harm in opening the challenges to the outside world, and there are a very high chance that we might get to see great ideas from outside. Now, this is the stage two of open innovation, what actually we learned from Chessborough in 2008, and we put into practice after 6 or 7 years after Chessborough taught us. So that was the amount of time it took us to set the right culture. But this time we were more confident, and we started with technical problems only in the manufacturing space. And we also said we will only start with those problems which are latent, which are forgotten, or in other words, there's a workaround that people have built to circumvent the problem. And that is part of the process. Basically, which means that there is no one actively working on the problem. And why do you think we did this? We did this because we wanted to be sure that there is no turf war that gets created between people who are, if there are people who are actively working on a problem, trying to protect their turf in terms of not allowing outside solutions to come in, and also to get some sufficient time to solve that problem, and set some shining examples for others to emulate. So that's how we have been doing it. We have worked on these 100 plus problems, and what we are trying to create cultural shift is willingness to open, and also work on few of the roadblocks. So what we have observed is that very large and successful corporations, they put some very excellent processes over a period of time. Now these processes have been put for logical reasons. They work very well for the company, but sometimes they take a very rigid shape, and they present roadblocks when it comes to collaborating with the tech startups or individuals. And few examples of those roadblocks could be the pricing, the way the pricing is evaluated, the way success criteria is defined, the payment terms, the valuation of intangibles like algorithms, safety issues, labor laws, and there are so many other things which these policies are meant for, not for startups, so to speak, but for large and medium-sized companies who can come in and work with large corporations. So this program has also brought to fore these challenges on which the companies are working in creating that cultural shift that I'm talking about. And obviously, we have worked on new revenue models and cost models. We're trying to develop new revenue models and cost models so that the open innovation can be more successful in companies. And now, as we are talking, we're trying to create one ecosystem of the external entities that you see on the right-hand side. And the idea is that can every Tata company create one ecosystem and make use of that one ecosystem to accelerate open innovation programs in their respective company. So and let me give you some examples, and I need to close now. Now, there are a few examples. We have taken some variety of examples just to indicate a few how we are engaging with the outside world. Now, here is a rail because we have a lot of railway line inside factories of Tata companies in India at least, and there's a lot of derailment and stuff like that. And we worked with a US startup, and we worked with them and worked on a solution to completely eliminate the derailment, which used to run into thousands in a year. Now, here is a second one where we got a solution from an undergraduate student for a problem which was existing for so many years, decades, of watch strap assembly, which was manually done by workers. Now, here was a simple solution by an undergraduate student who cracked this and almost semi-automated this for the company. On the bottom left, you see again a problem which perhaps is there for the last maybe 5 decades or maybe 8 decades. I don't know how many. As for as many years as the small thin sheet exists in the world. I'm talking about thin steel sheets, which is 0.2 millimeter. The whole industry works on buying and selling sheets on tons because nobody can count them, while the whole production planning happens on counts. And we are the first ones, with the help of an academic institute for the last 2 years, we've almost cracked the solution of counting these sheets using. So this was an example that I wanted to give you from partnership with an academia. Now the bottom example is of a tea bag, wherein the bags are of two types: the staple tea bags and the threaded tea bags. And the Indian regulation is trying to suggest that we want to get rid of the staple tea bag. But what about hundreds of machines that the Indian companies have purchased, which runs into millions, several $1 million? So here is the Tata company, which cracked this solution for another Tata company, is almost on the verge of cracking the solution, converting the staple machines into knotting machines. Very, very complex job. We've been working on this for the last 3 years. And the last one that I wanted to give you 2 examples is one is an example of a startup from Finland who is helping us to create laser marking laser branding on wires at a very high speed, so that we can put laser marking instead of inkjet marking, which gets eliminated or rubbed in a very few days time. And the very simple example, bottom one, is an example where it's a very simple solution. It's an integration of multiple solutions: battery, bespoke air conditioner, sizing the battery, putting the whole electronics into place. Very simple solution by bringing 2-3 vendors together, but a very high impact for so many machines which we run in minds of Tata Group. So let me close here with the 3 programs that I wanted to talk about, by ending by saying that the story still continues, and we have the aspirations, and our aspirations are absolutely aligned with the broad directions which our current chairman has set for the group. More lighthouse companies, more digital, and more scale, and everything that we do. More scale in terms of more scalable innovations, and also scaling more Tata people joining the innovation movement and bringing more moment and giving more momentum to this program. Thank you very much for your attention, and this is my end of the presentation. Sorry, I think I've shot by 5 odd minutes.
Oh, Joe, you just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Ravi. That was a terrific talk. Really enjoyed that. And before we get into the Q&A, I think it deserves reiteration, just the historical commitment that Tata, as well as the other family-based conglomerates in India, have had to social impact and social innovation, and the really unique role that organizations like Tata play as almost a trustee, such that notions of corporate social responsibility are embedded within these organizations as opposed to legislated from the top down. We're waiting for some questions from the audience, but I thought I would actually give you one myself, and something that I think about a lot. I was really drawn by some of the key words that you use, like self-confidence to innovate, creating a level playing field, creating an inclusive environment, And the manifestation, for instance, of this would be in terms of crowdsourcing ideas through that very, very inclusive and expansive ideation process. And I think I find that very alluring, and I think that there are very practical ways in which we can build that into an organization in terms of its practices. But I also picked up two other words that you talked a lot about and things that I think about in innovation studies. And the two words are competition and collaboration. And it seems to me that both of those dynamics, competition and collaboration, are absolutely integral to innovation. And they reflect all the things that we just talked about: inclusivity, self-confidence, a level playing field. And yet at the same time, competition and collaboration are two different kinds of activities, motivated actually by two different kinds of instincts. And I'm wondering how, from an organizational point of view, you reconcile that tension, and how, in fact, you put into place programs that encourage both competition and collaboration at the same time.
Yeah, so very, very interesting question. Again, I will use the Tata Business Excellence, the improvement framework, and also the innovation framework. So the TBM framework drives a lot of comparisons, benchmarking, competitiveness, trying to catch up, because it's impossible for an organization to be the best in everything. You might be best in 5 out of 10 things, but you're always playing. So every organization is playing the catch-up role in some form or the other, while it is leading the pack in some form, in some attributes. So the TBM model inspires our managers to play the catch-up and compete with the best. At the same time, when it comes to collaboration, now there are two ways of the way we look at these things in two ways. One is collaborating with the competition, vis-a-vis collaborating with anybody who wants to collaborate. So we have instances in our Tata group where, especially in the steel industry, dominantly, where I guess structurally the collaboration happens amongst the steel producers, structurally, because the cost of producing or coming out with a new technology is so huge, so enormous, because there is no way that one company can create a new technology for making a green technology for producing steel. So structurally, sometimes the collaboration happens among the competition. That's one. But what I was referring to was more collaboration with the new emerging high-tech companies. And there's a race as to who will collaborate. And we wanted to compete with the others to say that we want to be the most attractive corporate in India, or at least globally, maybe, at least to start with in India, for the tech startups to engage with. So that's the competition which I was referring to.
Thank you. Some questions have started coming in from the audience, and there are many here, but I think one that's top of mind for everyone is the adaptation that Tata had to do in the midst of COVID. Were there changes to your innovation model? Obviously, the challenges that COVID has brought nonetheless create many opportunities. I'm wondering how your company has responded to COVID.
Yeah, so here the different companies have responded differently, obviously, because if you look at the companies in 10 sectors, for some companies, and it was again, the COVID had its very variable impact. Some companies like hotels and airlines had a huge impact in Tata Group, and some companies had very, very less impact, and some were actually not at all impacted. Companies, all companies adopted the digital way of working. So if you look at the software company TCS, I think within a month it declared that people will not only, and they actually created work systems for employees to work from home. And they even, I guess, very recently, they declared that in all the times to come, 25% of a large majority of the people will always continue to work from home. And remember, when a software company works with a client, it has a very strong security norms, cyber security, a number of security norms. And if that company was able to scale up, and obviously with TCS there as a company who would use digital to very simply migrate its operations into pure virtual form, the other companies actually followed the norm, and actually they became the lighthouse for many other Tata companies, so to speak, I would say. And also many companies started, and when we are, I think Joe mentioned about Tata's getting into digital healthcare and health, actually the devices. So this was also used as an opportunity by Tata Group to start thinking about migrating into sectors where we are not present in.
Thank you. You had mentioned the very famous economic reforms of the early 1990s, the liberalizing reforms there that I think you indicated in many ways sort of lifted the lid and allowed organizations like Tata to really flourish, particularly in the innovation space. And this is something when we think about innovation, it's about pushing the envelope, right? It's about being at the very cutting edge. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how does an organization stay so cutting edge, and what does it do in terms of regulatory environments? How do you navigate that space by pushing the envelope, but an envelope that is nonetheless constituted by public regulations and so forth?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll start with the values that I talked about, the integrity and the ethical way of working. So obviously we work around that, and obviously it imposes. It sometimes appears that Tata Group is not as fast as maybe many other companies could be or might be. So that definitely brings in, sometimes we need to sacrifice our speed, so no doubt about that. But yeah, when it comes to what you asked, is I guess there are two things. One is, if we can create that desire across the levels, so not only the top level, but also across levels. Now, in our experience, at least in the Tata Group, what we find is, in many such programs, instead of top down, what works best is middle top and middle down. And if we can create that desire of stretching, taking stretch targets and giving the middle managers more freedom, we find it works extremely well in the culture of Tata. And that is what we, in most of the programs that you will find in Tata Group, including the consultants, they work middle top and middle down. I'm not saying that they don't work top down, but many of the programs which need to touch the fabric of the organization. And when you're talking about stretching the envelope, expanding the envelope, you need to touch the fabric of the organization. And so all such programs, including consultants, work in India with Tata companies, middle top and middle down.
Ravi, thank you so much. This was incredible. Unfortunately, we're out of time here. I think it again deserves repeating what you've shared with us. I mean, oftentimes we think about innovators as innovative people, those with the DNA that give them that risk-taking impulse, the ability to learn from failure, the ability, frankly, to embrace failure and so forth. And so we oftentimes attribute innovation to individual characteristics, if you will, individual DNA. What you've shared with us today is ways in which we can engineer organizational DNA, and in very practical ways, right? Not just talking about it, but here are very practical things that can be done to try to inculcate this culture within an organization. Terrifically insightful presentation today. I know there are many people who are watching the seminar from across all different sectors, public, private, different domains, technology, and so forth. I think we've all benefited enormously from hearing you today. Thank you so much again. We look forward to staying in touch. And of course, you are always welcome to the University of Toronto. And to all our guests who participated today, thank you for your participation, your attention, as well as for your questions, and my apologies that I was not able to get to all of them. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day, and thank you again, Ravi.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Ilan and Alex and Vanessa also for their guidance in the last few months that painstakingly provided me. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye now.